The US, China, and Russia are vying to establish nuclear power plants on the lunar surface, promising to fuel future bases, mining operations, and even permanent human settlements. The moon was only a celestial muse for poets and philosophers for thousands of years, until the US and the Soviet Union turned it into a battleground for space domination in the 20th century. Come 2025, the moon has become a frontier for a new kind of race, one for harnessing energy sources. Pause for a few seconds and support me with a subscribe. The US, China, and Russia are vying to establish nuclear power plants on the lunar surface, promising to fuel future bases, mining operations, and even permanent human settlements. But as these world powers prepare to harness the moon's potential, one question looms large. Could these nuclear outposts spark territorial claims, threatening the quiet peace of space? The idea of nuclear power on the moon sounds like science fiction, but it's closer to reality than most people think. The moon's tough conditions, weak gravity, and 2-week-long nights mean a reliable energy source is necessary for any long-term human presence. Solar panels are of little use during the extended periods of darkness, and batteries last for a limited time only. That leaves space explorers with the only option of nuclear power, whether through fission reactors that split heavy atoms into smaller ones, or fusion that combines small atoms into bigger ones to release massive energy. Mark J. Sundahl, director at the Global Space Law Center at Cleveland State University, tells TRT World that nuclear reactors can be used for interplanetary and orbital missions, a capability that could extend to lunar bases. But this technological leap comes with legal and geopolitical baggage. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty, the cornerstone of space law, is clear. No nation can claim ownership of the moon or any celestial body. The treaty doesn't prohibit nuclear power plants. It only bans nuclear weapons. A J-Link, an adjunct professor of space law at Howard University, tells TRT World. This leaves room for nations to build reactors. But the treaty's prohibition on national appropriation is meant to stop any country from staking a permanent claim to lunar territory. Yet, as Sundahl notes, the placement of a nuclear reactor on the moon will not affect the fundamental principle of the treaty, prohibiting national appropriation of any celestial body. After all, worldly powers seizing parts of the moon and asserting sovereign rights can potentially lead to space wars of catastrophic order. Imagine a lunar landscape dotted with nuclear outposts, each controlled by a different nation. These facilities could power mining operations for rare resources like helium-3, a fuel for clean fusion energy. The moon's surface is rich in helium-3, a rare element on Earth. In fact, helium-3 is often cited by the space community as a major reason to return to the moon. Analysts say that the Trump administration might push for fusion reactors to tap this resource. What happens when a nation's nuclear plant sits on a prime patch of helium-3-rich regolith, a layer of unconsolidated solid material covering the moon's bedrock? The temptation to control that area can possibly lead to claims of exclusivity. Elias Gökoklu, head of the Department of Private International Law at Altınbaş University in Istanbul, calls this the new space race. Space, being the common province of all humankind, should not be limited to usage by a few developed countries to conduct aggressive militarization, he tells TRT World. Unlike the Cold War era when the US and the Soviet Union competed for technological prestige, the current space race involves not just big nations, but also private corporations, like Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin. Private companies will likely dominate the lunar nuclear race, Link says, noting that the space treaty holds nations responsible for their companies' actions. It means that if a US company builds a reactor on the moon, the US government will eventually be liable for any mishaps under the UN Liability Convention. This was tested in 1978 when a Soviet satellite, Cosmos 954, crashed in Canada, scattering radioactive debris. The Soviet Union paid millions in compensation, a precedent that underscores the risks of nuclear activities in space. The Artemis Accords, a series of non-binding arrangements between the U.S. and other countries that outline the norms expected to be followed in outer space, add another layer of safeguards. These accords allow for safety zones around lunar facilities to protect operations. The precedent of exclusionary zones or safety zones has already been established by the Artemis Accords, he says. But the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space is currently discussing what resource rights will look like in space, he adds. If a nuclear plant requires a safety zone, could it evolve into a de facto claim over the surrounding resources? Gokuklu says that nations might advertise their reactors as serving all humankind while quietly pursuing national interests. Claiming rights over nuclear plants on the moon or other celestial bodies does not seem improbable in the future, unfortunately, he says. This is despite the fact that the Moon Agreement, a multilateral supplement to the Space Treaty, aims to keep the moon free of weapons. The Moon Agreement bans almost all military installations, Gokuklu says. But the line between civilian and military use is blurry. A nuclear reactor powering a lunar base could also support strategic operations, like satellite communications or reconnaissance. Militarization in space will always threaten international cooperation, Link says. Many nations have expressed fear that powerful countries could dominate space, leaving smaller nations sidelined. Gokuklu says developing countries may become less cooperative if big powers use space as if it were their national land. The Moon Agreement's environmental provisions, like avoiding forward contamination, meaning the transfer of contamination from Earth to the moon, lack teeth due to limited adoption. The Moon Agreement isn't very enforceable, Link says. A nuclear accident on the moon could scatter radioactive material, rendering large areas unusable. The high cleanup cost of the Cosmos 954 incident shows that the consequences of any environmental mishap on the moon could be a lot worse. The involvement of private companies exacerbates such fears. SpaceX's reusable rockets and Blue Origin's lunar expeditions make them key players in the space industry. If a company like SpaceX builds a reactor, who will ensure it meets international standards? Of course, the Space Treaty requires state oversight. But as private actors gain influence, nations like Turkey may demand robust space laws to manage disputes, says Gokuklu. Analysts say the lunar nuclear race could also reshape space law. Recent developments might lead to new interpretations, Gokuklu warns, particularly around territorial claims. If nations push for resource rights tied to nuclear outposts on the moon, the Space Treaty's ban on territorial claims could be tested. Link doubts a full reinterpretation of space law is imminent, as current laws allow lunar bases without claiming territory. Yet the longer-term risk is clear. Nuclear outposts could become flashpoints, especially if helium-3 becomes a game-changer for fusion energy. With the number of potential nuclear outposts rising, the temptation to claim a piece of the moon in the name of either safety zones or resource rights may grow as well. Sustainable access to space must benefit all humankind, Gokuklu says. Let's pause for a few seconds and give me a like for this video. Thank you so much. The race to establish nuclear power on the moon is not just a technological or geopolitical endeavor. It's a moral challenge that tests humanity's stewardship of the cosmos. The moon, a pristine celestial body untouched by the scars of industrialization, demands a level of responsibility that transcends national borders. A single misstep, a reactor leak, a containment failure could contaminate the lunar surface with radioactive material, rendering valuable resources like helium-3 inaccessible for generations. The 1978 Cosmos 954 incident, where a Soviet satellite's nuclear debris littered Canadian soil, serves as a stark reminder of the stakes. On the moon, where there's no atmosphere to disperse radiation or ecosystems to absorb the damage, the consequences could be even more severe. Environmental concerns extend beyond accidents. The Moon Agreement's call to avoid forward contamination, the transfer of Earth-based microbes or pollutants to the lunar surface, carries profound implications for nuclear operations. Mining helium-3, for instance, involves excavating vast quantities of regolith, a process that could disrupt the Moon's delicate surface and release dust clouds that settle slowly in its low gravity. These activities risk altering the lunar environment in ways we barely understand. Elias Gokuklu emphasizes that the Moon's environmental integrity must be preserved as a shared heritage. Without robust international regulations, the rush to exploit lunar resources could mirror Earth's history of environmental exploitation, with consequences that echo across centuries. The ethical dimension is equally pressing. The Moon, as the Outer Space Treaty declares, is the province of all humankind. Yet, the involvement of private corporations like SpaceX and Blue Origin raises questions about equitable access. If a handful of powerful nations and their corporate proxies dominate lunar nuclear infrastructure, smaller nations, particularly those in the global south, could be sidelined. Gokuklu warns that developing countries may become less cooperative if big powers treat space as their national playground. The promise of helium-3 as a clean energy source could exacerbate global inequalities if only a few players control its extraction and use. The lunar race, then, is not just about energy, it's about ensuring that the benefits of space exploration are shared globally. Building a nuclear reactor on the Moon is a feat of engineering that pushes the boundaries of human ingenuity. Unlike Earth-based reactors, lunar systems must operate in a vacuum, withstand extreme temperature swings from 260 degrees Fahrenheit in sunlight to minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit in shadow, and function without regular maintenance. Fission reactors, like those proposed by NASA, rely on uranium fuel to generate heat, which powers turbines or thermoelectric systems. These designs must be compact, lightweight, and capable of autonomous operation for years. NASA's current plan for a 100-kilowatt reactor, roughly enough to power a small lunar base, hinges on advancements in heat dissipation and radiation shielding challenges compounded by the Moon's lack of atmosphere. Fusion reactors, while still experimental, offer even greater promise. Helium-3-based fusion could produce energy with minimal radioactive byproducts, making it ideal for lunar applications. However, fusion technology remains in its infancy, with Earth-based prototypes like ITER still decades from commercial viability. The Moon's abundant helium-3 could accelerate fusion research, but extracting and processing it requires infrastructure that doesn't yet exist. Private companies are stepping into this gap, with SpaceX exploring reusable landers to transport reactor components, and Blue Origin developing lunar habitats that could integrate nuclear power. These innovations, while exciting, underscore the complexity of the task. As a J-Link notes, the technological leap to lunar nuclear power is monumental, but it's within our grasp if we commit to collaboration. The lunar nuclear race could either unite or divide humanity. The Artemis Accords, while a step toward cooperation, are limited by their non-binding nature and US-centric framework. Only 46 nations have signed on, leaving major players like China and Russia outside the fold. The International Lunar Research Station, ILRS, backed by a diverse coalition including Venezuela and Azerbaijan, offers an alternative vision, but risks deepening geopolitical divides. To avoid a fractured lunar future, a new framework is needed, one that builds on the Outer Space Treaty's principles, while addressing modern realities. The United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space is already grappling with these issues, particularly around resource rights. Proposals for a global lunar authority, akin to the International Seabed Authority for Deep-Sea Mining, have gained traction. Such a body could oversee nuclear operations, enforce environmental standards, and ensure equitable resource distribution. The moon's resources belong to all of us, Gokuklu argues. A cooperative framework is the only way to prevent a free-for-all. Transparency is critical. Nations and companies must share reactor designs, safety protocols, and resource extraction plans to build trust. Education and public engagement are also vital. The lunar race captures imaginations, but it risks alienating those who see it as a playground for the powerful. Initiatives like NASA's Artemis Student Challenges, which engage young people in lunar technology development, can inspire a new generation to view the moon as a shared frontier. By fostering a sense of global ownership, we can ensure that the lunar nuclear race benefits all of humanity, not just a select few. As 2030 approaches, the lunar South Pole will likely become the epicenter of this new space race. Its water, ice, and helium-3 deposits make it a strategic prize. But its harsh terrain and limited landing sites heighten the risk of competition. The U.S. aims to establish its reactor by decade's end, while China and Russia target a similar timeline for the ILRS. Private companies, unbound by the bureaucratic constraints of governments, may move even faster. SpaceX's Starship, capable of delivering 150 tons to the lunar surface, could ferry reactor components in a single mission, while Blue Origin's lunar landers offer precision deployment. Yet, the true challenge lies not in technology, but in diplomacy. The Outer Space Treaty's ban on national appropriation is clear, but its enforcement is murky. Safety zones, while practical, could become flashpoints if perceived as territorial claims. The temptation to own a helium-3 rich crater or a water-rich crater is real, especially as fusion energy inches closer to reality. The stakes are not just scientific, but existential. A lunar conflict could derail humanity's dreams of becoming a multi-planetary species. The moon, in all its desolate beauty, is a mirror reflecting our greatest aspirations and deepest flaws. It challenges us to innovate, to cooperate, and to dream beyond the horizon. Nuclear power on the lunar surface is not just a means to an end. It's a testament to what humanity can achieve when we reach for the stars together. As we stand on the cusp of this new era, let us choose a path that honors the moon's legacy as a beacon of unity, not a battleground for division. The race for lunar nuclear power is not about who claims the prize first. It's about who can inspire the world to share it.